Hello, I'm Michelle and welcome to my channel, Books Cause Insomnia. In this video, I'm going to do a quick recap of each of the books that I read in the month of February. And I'm leaning over funny because I want you to be able to see Olive while she takes her nap. The first book that I read was Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm sure you already know what it's about. I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. I gave it 5 stars, and it was a really good start to my first sci-fi series read. I wanted to try to incorporate some longer series into my reading repertoire, and I thought this one would be a good start. It really is, especially with me living in Vegas. I really love reading about the desert, and this did not disappoint. I even pulled out my little sticky note annotation thingies. If you want to hear more in depth about any of the books that I'm mentioning, I will put a link up here in the corner to my vlog video list. In the thumbnail of each video, I have which books are in there, but I go a lot more in depth about my thoughts, feelings, emotions, all that about each of the books. And you get to see more footage of Olive and my cats, Marty and Zelda. And I listened to Death on the Nile. I thought this was a good, solid book. Poirot got on my nerves a little bit. He just felt a little bit over the top with his perfectly accurate knowledge at all times. Well, it irritated you too, huh? Did you hear her snort? But I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a good, solid read. I gave it 4 stars. I have not watched the movie to this yet. I did watch the Dune movie, and I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next movie. I listened to My Darkest Prayer by S.A. Cosby. This is the author that wrote Razorblade Tears and Blacktop Wasteland. This is the first book that he came out with, and he says in the, well, not in this version, but the version that has been printed now, this is actually a first edition, but the I listened to the audiobook, and he does talk on there about please be patient with the writing in this. It is his first book. I thought it was really good, though. It wasn't as good as the other two, no, but it was a good, solid read. It was a 4-star read, I think. I definitely recommend it if you're an S.A. Cosby fan. Also, I did get very attached to the protagonist, Nathan. And usually I like characters, or I don't like them, or I don't care about them, or I care about them, but I got really attached to him. I really like him. He might be one of my favorite characters of the year. So far, he definitely is. Then I listened to I Know Where She Is. My mom gave me this book. She seems to have an affinity for books about women whose children have been abducted. I don't know what that means, but maybe she's worried that something will happen to me, or was worried. I'm not sure. But she reads a lot of books about child abduction and the mother having to figure everything out from there. But this was a very good, very solid read. There was some twists in here that I wasn't expecting, and I was a little bit worried, not being a mom myself, that it might really fall flat for me, because I can't really relate to what that would feel like to have a child be abducted, but I felt like I really did connect with it and relate to it anyway. I give it 4.5 stars. I'm not rounding it up to 5, because there's just certain elements that a book has to have to be a 5-star read for me that this one doesn't have, but I definitely recommend it, and it's a really solid 4. I also listened to Never Lie by Freida McFadden. That one is about a husband and wife who go out to look at a house. They're on the market to buy a house, and this house is haunted, and a bunch of crazy things start happening. They get stuck at the house, and the realtor never shows up. I definitely recommend that one too. That was a good, solid 4-star read. Then I read The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. I love this cover. In this book, we follow a girl named Alex, who is an author that wants to be published. She gets accepted into this writing retreat that 4 other writers are at. And whoever wins gets their book published, and they get this big check, and their lives are just perfect from there on out. It's a wonderful thought. So she gets accepted, and she finds out that her arch nemesis, Ren, is also going. And so she's getting all this anxiety about it. She gets there. All kinds of crazy stuff starts happening. It's a haunted house. One of the authors goes missing. There's a lot of unexpected things that happen in the book. It's, I would say, a very psychological thriller heavy. It's got more than one girl in the book who is struggling with their sexuality and their sexual identity. And I thought that was it was a really fascinating take on that, I think. Now, I don't know that I've read a book anytime recently where someone was struggling with their sexual identity. There's a lot of just psychological components, narcissism, guilt, denial, all kinds of things. And the author is a therapist in real life. Well, not that she's not a writer in real life now. She wrote this book, but on top of being an author, she is a therapist. So it makes sense that she was able to write a book like this. I really loved it, and I felt so much passion towards it until the last fourth of the book. And then it started falling flat. It was wrapped up in a bow too neatly, if that makes sense. So I give this one 4 stars. I thought it was really good, though. It's definitely worth a read if you enjoy mysteries. It is a bit of a slow burn, so if you're not a slow burn fan, proceed with caution. I listened to In a Dark, Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. That one, I enjoyed the first fourth of the book and not the rest. That one really fell flat, too. I felt no connection to any of the characters. It's not even that I didn't like them. I just felt nothing. In the writing retreat, just so you know, they're unlikable characters, but they're unlikable to the point where I cared about them and I liked them, if that makes sense. In a Dark, Dark Wood has characters that just, I don't know, it felt like a lot of them didn't even need to be there. And things just didn't quite make sense for me, and the ending was weird. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I don't recommend that one. But if it's something you want to read and you're a Ruth Ware fan, give it a chance. Maybe I was just in a weird mood that day. Who knows? I'm going to have to look at my notes on this one. Then I listened to Moon of the Crusted Snow by Waubgshig Rice. And I listened to it, and I'm going to start doing the World of Horror book group. I'll put a link to that announcement video down in the description box in case you're interested. But basically what I'll be doing is reading horror novels from different countries around the world. And I started with Canada, and this book is about an Indigenous man named Evan who lives just north of Ontario. And one day the internet just goes out and everybody thinks, oh, okay, our provider's just having a problem or whatever. Then a few days later, the power goes out, and it keeps going from there. It's a very slow burn horror novel. There's not a lot of blood and gore or anything like that. This book scared me, really scared me. The thought of things, the idea of things, to the point where 2 weeks after reading it, I'm still thinking about it. It kind of shook me. I also loved reading about the Indigenous culture and some of their beliefs, some of their ways. It was really good, I thought. I gave that one 5 stars. Then I read The Color Purple. Is this not the best cover you've seen for this book? I got this on eBay, I think, and it showed up, and I was surprised to discover that this is actually a UK version, so that's why the covers, I think the UK usually has better covers, if I'm honest. I'm assuming that you know what this is about, so I'm just going to tell you very quickly what I thought of it. I thought it was exceptional. I thought it was beautiful and moving and harrowing. It really goes deep into what abuse does to women, especially abuse by men, and how other women can help women heal, and sometimes women can help heal themselves. I found it very healing reading it. It was just so moving and emotional for me. It's very dear to my heart. I gave this one 5 stars. I listened to and read The Banned Bookshop of Maggie Banks by Shauna Robinson. And this one is about a girl who has a hard time holding down a job, and her best friend co-owns a bookstore in a historical town, and she is going on maternity leave. So she asks her if she'll come work for her in the bookstore while she goes on maternity leave. And she does, and she gets very irritated at the fact that the only books that are being sold are books that were published during a time when a certain person in history was alive. I can't remember his name. William Bell, I think it was. So she starts trying to figure out how to sell newer books, and she's not really a book lover, but she becomes one in the book, which was probably my favorite part of the book, was her becoming a book lover and getting so passionate about sharing books with people, and not just a certain select few amount of books, but all books. I got pretty into that part. I didn't realize when I got this book, or even while I was reading it, but apparently it's a romance novel. I thought the romance in it was kind of a secondary part of the storyline, but I guess it wasn't. I just didn't think it was that much of the story. I thought it was okay. It had good points and bad points. I love reading about history, but hearing about the irritation of the history of this town started getting on my nerves. There was no historical information, just, I hate that we have to do this kind of thing. And the ending felt very unrealistic to me, to the point of, now here's where it did remind me of a romance. In a romance movie, you know, at the end of the movie, when the guy realizes that he loves the girl, and he's like knocking people down, running down the street, and then he gets in a cab, and they're like, you know, outrunning cop cars who are chasing them, trying to get to the airport, and then they like go running into the airport through security, which you're not allowed to do, but hey, they do, and onto the plane to get this woman that they love. That's not what happened in this book, but it felt excessive and over the top and unrealistic like that. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. But if it sounds like something that you'd enjoy, I definitely recommend that you read it, because it is a fun book. It is very kind of cozy, and the romance part was fun. It was just a very light, very vanilla romance. I decided to go ahead and do a reread this month again, and the book I decided to reread was Double Love, which is the first book in the Sweet Valley High series by Francine Pascal. Was this a really well-written book? No. Was it a really deep book? No. Were there a lot of passages that I underlined? No. Did I enjoy it? I really did. It was just a nice escape from cell phones and internet and technology and just all the weird things we deal with now, all the division that we deal with now. It didn't feel like the division was so intense back then. I remember back in the 80s and 90s not even really knowing what a lot of people's political leanings were or what party they belonged to, and I kind of preferred that. So it was nice to step back into this old-fashioned vintage world, and I felt like my mood was heightened while I was reading it. So I want to keep going with the series. It's got its flaws, but anything that can elevate my mood and get my mind off of this weird world we're living in is definitely worth reading, right? But it was a 3-star read. Then I read, now I don't think this was a reread. This is just a vintage book that I wanted to read. If I read it years ago, I don't remember. But it's Hit and Run by R.L. Stine. This one is about a group of teenagers who are just so anxious to get their driver's license. You remember back, like when I was in high school in the mid-90s, everybody wanted to get their license. It was such a big deal. Huge deal. Nowadays, I don't know if kids really care about that like we did back then. But this book was published when I was in high school about teenagers, so it's pretty hand in hand with how teenagers were back then. Trying to win a cute contest. So these 4 kids are trying to learn how to drive, and they're illegally going out and driving their parents' cars together, like taking turns on who drives without having a license. They accidentally hit a guy one night and kill him, and they decide to leave, and all these crazy spooky things start happening. So the book is not just a light horror, but it's also very funny. These kids love to do a lot of practical jokes on each other. I remember that was a much bigger thing back in the day too. People aren't real funny like they used to be, and people don't joke around like they used to. I feel like we're a very serious society now. So it was nice to read something so lighthearted and fun and remember all these different pranks and jokes that used to be a thing. And I found myself laughing, but there was also times where I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on? Or that kind of thing. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite good. And I give it 4 stars. Then I read High School Debut, which is a manga book. And this is the first book in the series. The author is Kazune Kawahara. This book is about a girl named Haruna who is in high school now. And she feels like, well, she's in high school. It's time to have a boyfriend. And she had been a star softball player. And in softball, whenever you want to achieve something that you're not achieving, you hire a coach. Well, she's having a hard time finding a boyfriend. So she decides to hire one of her friend's brothers to help her get a boyfriend. And they start working on how she acts and how she dresses. And it's one of those eye-rolling yet fun teenage books that I just really enjoyed. It was kind of like the other 2 books that I just mentioned. It was just a fun, quirky book. And I actually have put the next 2 books in this series on reserve at the library, and I'm looking forward to reading them. And I give this 4 stars. The last book that I read, sorry about my voice, by the way. I don't feel sick at all anymore, but I'm still congested. I'm still coughing things up, and my voice is still a couple octaves lower than it usually is. So I'm sorry about that. It'll go away eventually. The last book that I read was The Killer's Wife, which a viewer of this channel recommended. Her name is Alicia W. And the book is by Victor Methos. And this is the first book in a 3-book series that's called the Desert Plains series. And this is a mystery, thriller, suspense book. And it takes place in Las Vegas, which obviously I love. This book is about a woman named Jessica, who is a prosecutor, and her ex-husband is a serial killer. And after he got arrested, she found out that she was pregnant. And so she's a single mom who jumped through a lot of hoops that were literally lit on fire to create this career that she has. And there's a copycat killer who's copying her ex-husband. And she has to get involved because only she can get answers out of her ex-husband to try to help catch this new copycat killer. I loved this book. It was so good. There was so many twists and turns, and there was moments that shocked me. There was moments that were a little bit predictable, but that's okay. In this book, there's the prosecutor, there's a guy in the FBI, there's cops, there's lawyers, and the serial killer, and then the copycat. And it felt like the perfect combination of everybody. There wasn't too much prosecutor talk, but enough to where it was informative. There wasn't too much time spent in the courtroom, but there was enough to where it was informative. There was not too much time spent on the guy that was in the FBI, and because I know sometimes it can get so dry and boring reading about a detective or a cop or a lawyer, but this book was not that. It was very entertaining, and it was really hard to stop listening to the point where I've now started listening to the second book in the series because I didn't want to stop. So this one was actually a 5-star read for me. But this one just really stood out to me in a lot of ways, and there was certain parts in it that meant something to me. Yeah. I went and saw my mom this month, in case you're not a vlog person, and I broke my rule of being on a book ban, or book buying ban. I might not be able to be a book buying ban person. We went thrifting, and I saw a book by 2 different authors that for me are auto buys, and I just couldn't resist, especially for the price that I ended up paying. So Sue Miller is an author that I really love, and I have not read The Senator's Wife, and I spent $1.15 on this book. I couldn't help myself, you guys. I could not. But if you've read it, let me know, and let me know what you thought of it. I'm assuming it's about a senator's wife. I haven't even read the back. Sue Miller buying the book, that's it. But if you've read it and you really enjoyed it, let me know. Maybe I'll push it closer up on my TBR stack. The other one that I got for $2.29 was Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. I don't know what this one's about either. I just love her books, though. Let me know if you've read this, and if you did, what you thought of it. Or if you've seen the show on Netflix, what did you think of it? That's it for all my rambling and all of my quick book reviews. Be sure to let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought of them, or if you're planning on reading any of them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. Happy reading. You gonna say bye? Olive says bye. Right?